Welcome to this Saturday travel and history tip, and we're continuing on in our sites in Massachusetts, and today we will be going to the northwest side of Boston to the Lowell National Historical Park in Lowell. We've spent quite a few Saturdays in the Boston area. We will be wrapping this up next week. I'm sure some of you are going, finally, but there's so much around there to go to see. It's definitely a destination point for anyone that loves American history. We started out this tour at the Saugus Iron Works. Then we actually went way to the western end of the state to the Springfield Armory. Then back to Boston, we went to the Longfellow National Historic Site, Frederick Law Olmsted National Historic Site, and the Adams National Park. Popped on over to the Salem Maritime National Historic Site, and then to the famous Lexington and Concord Minuteman National Historical Park, and a famous cemetery filled with literary figures. Last week we went to New Bedford and to the Whaling Museum. That was a treat, and we also included a stop over to see Plymouth Rock. This week we will be in Lowell. Lowell is home of the American Industrial Revolution and the first large-scale planned industrial city in the United States. During this time in history, people left the common agrarian lifestyle for factory employment. Beginning in 1835, brick mill buildings dominated the banks of the Merrimack River. Well, I'm going to add, brick mill buildings still dominate the banks of the Merrimack River all along in New Hampshire and in Massachusetts. Beginning in 1835, brick mill buildings dominated the banks of the Merrimack River, where primarily young female workers, many from other countries, sewed up the mass production textile industry. Started daily by the call of a bell from an imposing tower, loud noises clanged from the massive mill buildings 10 to 14 hours each day. The Lowell National Historical Park presents the Boott Cotton Mills Museum, where a weave room with 88 operating looms can be deafening, and it is the best part of the park, and they give you earplugs before you enter the loom room. The park encompasses 5.6 miles of canals, which once channeled the river into the mills and preserves one of the oldest textile mill yard complexes in the United States. Start at the Visitor Center, which was the former Lowell Manufacturing Company mill. There is a charge for boat rides and the museum. All was expectancy. Changes were coming. Nobody could guess what. Discover the continuing revolution. Lowell's water-powered textile mills catapulted the nation, including immigrant families and early female factory workers, into an uncertain new industrial era. Nearly 200 years later, the changes that began here still reverberate in our shifting world economy. Explore Lowell, a living monument to the dynamic human story of the Industrial Revolution. The places to see at this park are the Merrimack River, the Mill Girls and Immigrants exhibit, Suffolk Mills Turbine, the Capitol and the Agent's House, and the Acre. But if you have limited time, the place to go is the Boott Cotton Mills Museum. There are guided tours throughout historic Lowell, and guided tours are offered seasonally by the National Park. And as you can see by this sign, other businesses are now in the mill buildings, and how I previously mentioned that they still line the Merrimack River, many of these old buildings have been converted into offices and condominiums. The structures are so sound that there's no reason to tear them down. Just renovate. And here we go with this word again. Evolution of a mill yard. The mill yard has not evolved. It is not non-life turning into life. Things have changed in the mill yard. The Boott Cotton Mills complex is one of the finest examples of mill architecture in the United States. The mill complex you see today resulted from many decades of expansion and adaptation. In the 1830s, there were 4 mill buildings here. The area around the mills was open because of the fear and danger of fire. In the 1840s, the introduction of sprinkler systems into the mills made their expansion possible. The original mills were then connected to make 2 larger buildings, and the 5th mill was added. The open space vanished. And in the 1870s to present, the widespread use of steam power after the Civil War led to another round of construction. 4 more mills were added, and the earlier buildings were expanded. Eventually, as the mill yard was completely enclosed, views of River City and canals disappeared. The park documents the nation's transition from farm to factory, the history of immigrant labor, and the technology of industrial trial labor technology. Lowell's water-powered textile mills catapulted the nation, including immigrant families and early female factory workers, into an uncertain new industrial era. Nearly 200 years later, the changes that began here still reverberate in our shifting world economy. Explore Lowell, a living monument to the dynamic human story of the Industrial Revolution. The exhibits are so authentic and beautiful. They have one whole room of just fabric. It's just really interesting. People expect clothes to just appear, but there had to be fabric made, and before that, there was just thread. And then these weaving looms make the material. It's a fabulous process that many people aren't even aware of. In the museum section, they have all kinds of artifacts and signage. We never thought that the mills were going to leave in the 1930s and 40s. I thought I was going to have a job in the mills for the rest of my life. Arthur Morissette, mill worker. He said this in 1984. They had been there for so long, no one expected them and their need to ever go away. We saw this clock in the museum section. This clock was made in Boston by Zalman Aspinwall between 1809 and 1813. It was purchased for the offices of the Boston Manufacturing Company in Waltham in 1813 by Francis Cabot Lowell, and a beautiful clock it is. At the back of the Boott Mill, we found this sign, "Pushing the Limits." Engineers in Lowell pushed water power technology to and beyond its known limits. New mills demanded more power, more miles of canal, greater control over water rights, constant attention to water flow, and more efficient equipment. That quest for improved power generating machinery took a huge step forward here in the Boott Mills in October of 1849. By making use of both the weight and the pressure of falling water, turbines proved far superior to the water wheels used for centuries. Less sensitive to flooding, turbines installed in pits like the one you see here continue to operate in high water. This is all such an amazing place to understand the Industrial Revolution. We have not ridden on the water canal boats yet, but we would love to do that. You have to get tickets, and they are on a first-come, first-served basis. You get them at the Visitor Center at 246 Market Street. And you can ride the trolley to the different sites, but we chose just to walk. And there is some free parking for the national park, but you'll want to figure that out before you head that way, as this is a very old city and very congested. In the shadow of the mills, to the right stands a boarding house block built in 1837 for the Boott Cotton Mills workers. Dozens of company-owned boarding houses served as home for the thousands of young single women, Lowell's Mill Girls. As the sign on the door reads, "Please enter here." And it was an exciting exhibit, and I thought this one was funny. It talked about the different food that they ate and their breakfast, dinner, and supper. How many of you call lunch dinner and call dinner supper? The exhibits were very nice. They had replicas set up of the rooms the way they would have been when the girls lived there. You may have noticed over the last dozen or so years that there are national park quarters, and we have one of the National Park Quarters albums. The United States Mint and Lowell National Historical Park launched the Lowell Quarter into circulation on February 6, 2019. You might want to get one of these books. It's a lot of fun. We have a few openings still in our book. It's all a part of American history. Learn it, love it, appreciate it. Don't let them steal our history. Share our American history. And I hope you've gone to my new website, danasbooks.net, and looked at all the videos that we have and our new recipes section. Hope you watched the Saturday Travel and History Tips. And if you appreciate our content, tell others and repost on your social platforms. Thank you.